All right, folks, welcome back. Here is part E, our last video of the GDP packet. All right, so this question here, this is just to get you thinking that GDP, while it is a very nice, useful measure of the overall picture of the economy, what is in total the economy producing, what I'm going to try and show you here is that it really doesn't tell us very much, though, about how the individuals within the economy are faring. For example, we may have a country with an extremely high GDP, but the people in the countries are very poor. May potentially have a very low standard of living. So the end of chapter 5, they kind of talk about this, the standard of living, and this statistic called the Human Development Index, or HDI. So I'm going to actually talk about that and show you where you can find that information in this video as well. But first, let's take a look at this problem and look at part A. So we have 5 countries. I will, in just a few minutes, reveal what these countries are. These are actual countries, actual data that I got from the IMF World Economic Outlook database, where you guys had to, you guys actually went to that site, right, for homework 4 to look up GDP values. So these are actual countries, actual data. So what we have here, 5 countries. I've kind of listed them in largest to smallest GDP value. So you're asked the question, which country do you think has the highest standard of living? Working with a partner. So normally we would have done this one in class, but since we had Monday off due to the holiday, we didn't have time to do this in class. So think about it if you haven't already, and see if you might have an idea. Rank them in order, highest to lowest. What would you think? And why would you rank them that way? And you can pause the video if you want to think about it for a minute. All right, so maybe what you did, again, really the problem is we don't know. Maybe what you did is you just left them like this, right? Maybe thinking, oh, well, the country A, they have the highest GDP value, therefore they should have the highest standard of living. And country E has the lowest, so potentially they have the lowest standard of living. Maybe that was your logic here. But again, remember, this is just GDP. This just tells us the total value of production of the economy. We do not know how many people live in these countries. Country A, country B, C, D, E. Maybe country A has billions of people, while country B, yes, they have a way lower GDP, but maybe they only have millions of people living in country B. So the GDP per person potentially could be higher, even though they have a smaller overall GDP. So this is kind of getting at, in the chapter they talk about the limitations of GDP. Things that GDP does not include, things like the cost of pollution, the quality of production, the value of underground production, things like that. It also doesn't take into account a whole host of other indicators like health statistics, access to clean sanitation and clean water. So yeah, definitely GDP tells us a lot about production, but it really doesn't tell us very much about standard of living. So maybe there's a better measure. So let's scroll on down to the next page, and on the next page, part B, I've added in some more information, and again, this is actual information from the IMF database. Now I've got GDP per capita, which represents GDP per person. Output per person, or roughly equivalent to income per person per year. So for example, if we look at country A, $5,396.50. So what that statistic means is, on average, in a year, the output, or again, roughly income per person, is about $5,400. Country B, it's close to $10,000 per person per year. Country C and D have a much, much higher income per person, or GDP per person. And country E again is kind of on the lower end, about $7,000 per person per year. Okay, so again, GDP per capita. is GDP, or output per person, or again, roughly income per person. We get this figure per person, right, by, if we had the population number for these countries, we would just divide the GDP number by population, and that's going to give us our GDP per capita, or GDP per person. Okay, so that's how you would calculate that statistic if you had that information. Again, when we hit chapter 9 and talk about development, we'll talk more about this Human Development Indicator, or Human Development Index, HDI, and we'll be actually calculating GDP per capita. But again, really it's just GDP divided by the population. All right, now how would you rank these? If you wanted to rank them in terms of standard of living. So again, you might say, okay, well, I'm going to look at the GDP per capita now. That's roughly income per person. So generally, maybe I would think that the higher the GDP per capita, the higher the standard of living, right? This is roughly 71,000 per person per year. That's very high. So country D probably has and country C actually probably have a very high standard of living, whereas countries B, E, and A have a generally lower standard of living. And that's actually very good logic. But again, what I'm going to show you is that even GDP per capita, while it is a better measure of the standard of living, it also, again, doesn't include a lot of those other social indicators like health statistics, educational achievement, longevity, things like that. Okay, so you learned in the chapter about this thing called the Human Development Index, or HDI. The HDI, again, takes into account three broad indicators. One is income per person, or roughly GDP per capita GDP. Okay, so it's made up of income per person. Also longevity, life expectancy. How long do people live? And the last thing is mean and expected years of schooling. So educational statistics. All right. And so generally speaking, the higher each of these three categories, so higher income, higher life expectancy, higher average and expected years of schooling, we're going to have a higher index ranking. Therefore, that would kind of mean a better, higher standard of living. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what these countries are and tell you what their HDI rank is. It's slightly different than if we had just ranked them in order of even GDP per capita. All right, so country C actually has the highest level of development. That country is Norway. All right, they are ranked number 1. So that means they are the most developed country. Again, I'll pull up those statistics in just a second. But those three pieces, very high income per capita, as you see here. Not the highest, but very high. They also have a very high life expectancy and high number average and expected years of schooling. So their rank is number 1. All right, now the other country that also has the very high GDP per capita, that one's next, but not quite as high up there as Norway, because this country, which is Kuwait, has a lower life expectancy than Norway does and lower educational statistics. So that's why their HDI rank, which again we kind of say is a better indicator of standard of living, it's not perfect but better, they have a much lower development index ranking. All right, next up is country B, which is the Ukraine. All right, and they have an HDI rank of 81. So a little bit farther down the list. Again, they have a lower income per person, GDP per person, lower life expectancy, lower schooling. Next up is country A, which turns out to be India. They have a massive GDP, right? Their GDP number is extremely high. They're one of the largest economies in the world. But they also have a very, very, very high population, high number of poor people, high poverty rate, low access to sanitation. So their life expectancy is much lower, and their educational system is not as high as these other countries. So their HDI ranking is much, much lower. They are ranked at 130 out of 100 and roughly 180, 190 countries. All right, and last up is country E, which turns out to be Angola. That is in sub-Saharan Africa. All right, and yeah, the low kind of down the line, we're gonna have countries from sub-Saharan Africa. Haiti is in that what we call low level of human development. Again, very low income per capita, much relatively lower life expectancy, and lower values for these educational indicators. And so Angola is ranked 149th out of all of our countries. So that's probably, again, if you looked at the HDI, this is how we would rank it. Slightly different than GDP per capita. So again, the whole purpose of this activity is to get you to kind of think beyond GDP, even beyond GDP per capita. There are other indicators, social indicators we might want to look at, like life expectancy, years of schooling, again, health statistics, gender equality statistics, poverty statistics, income distribution, a whole host of other things we might want to look at. All right, now where did I get these rankings from? Where can you find that? So I'm going to pull up, here's the web page. You should be able to see that on your screen. Here's the URL, so you can go ahead and type that in, or if you just type in the Human Development Index, it will pull up, if you do a Google search for that, it'll lead you to this website from the UNDP, and then you can just click on this, or actually you can, if you want to just pull up this table here, here is the index. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit. Here we see Norway, number 1. This is just the index value. We won't worry about how that's calculated, but here's their life expectancy, way higher than the US. Years of schooling, expected and average, and then here's the income per person, about 65,000. Okay. Here's the US is down here, 8th. Why are they not number 1? Well, a big reason is life expectancy here is quite a bit lower than many of these other. Look at basically the lowest out of all these top 20, top 30 countries. Life expectancy here is quite a bit lower. Years of schooling, that's pretty good, and income per person, that's very high as well. But the U.S. is down a bit, again, because of this life expectancy figure. And again, you can scroll all the way down here. Here is Kuwait, you'll find down here, right here, number 48. The other countries we had on here, here's the Ukraine, the statistics for the Ukraine right here. India, again, we can keep scrolling down here. India was 130th. There's India right here, 130. Look at that, much lower life expectancy, much lower years of schooling, and here's their income per person figure. All right, we're almost out of time on the video here, but again, if we keep scrolling down, here's Angola at 149, much lower life expectancy, years of schooling, income per person. So you can have a lot of fun with these statistics, and the last country on the list, Niger, is 188. So they've got 188 countries. Again, look at particularly the schooling and the income per person. That's below